Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, hello. Hello, Suncoast HR. Good afternoon. Woohoo! Yes, I got a woohoo. That's great, especially after lunchtime. So wonderful. I am here to speak with you, of course, as you've heard, on the topic of resilience. And if you're like a lot of the HR professionals that I work with, you may be saying, well, I don't want to be resilient anymore, or I'm over this having to be resilient thing. Can any of you relate to that? Yes, I see some hands. Yes, yes. So us as Floridians, and especially you as an HR professional, have gone through a lot of adversity over the last couple years. I'm sure you all remember COVID-19 and becoming the chief COVID officer of your organization. And also, as we had a panel discussion earlier today, you laying the groundwork for the future of work, from hybrid and remote working policy and what that looks like. And not only that, but also Hurricane Ian. And so even if you didn't lose anything in the storm, you know all too well that it takes just a little shift of the winds for either your home or your place of work to be impacted. And so we've experienced a lot of adversity. What we know from the research of resilience is that people who go through adversity and they apply resilience skills like emotional intelligence that I'm going to talk with you about today end up coming out on the other side experiencing normal again. That is common with resilience. But not only do we experience that new state of normal, but we experience what many people call post-traumatic growth, or really means coming out on the other side with more purpose, more joy, and more success in your life. And really that is what I want for you. That is what I want for all of the teams that you lead. As you face the challenges that are both big and small that are thrown at you, I want you to take those challenges and be able to have them be building blocks for your growth and for your success, rather than something that knocks you down. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like today. First, I want to explain to you why this topic of resilience is so important to me. And you heard a little bit about it as Rich was introducing me in my bio. But let me tell you a little story. This is a picture of my husband and I, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And in this picture and on paper, things looked great in my life. I had just married my college sweetheart. We had 2 fur babies, and we're trying for some human babies of our own. I had a great 6-figure career that was paying me well to travel, both professionally and personally for fun, and we had just bought our first home. So on paper, things look great. But behind that picture and that I've got it all together look that I had on my face, I was really wearing an armor that was covering up what was really going on. The truth was that I was burnt out. The truth was that I didn't have any fulfillment in my job or my days. The truth was that I was drinking a glass or 2 or a bottle of wine every night to pretend that everything was okay. I was working out several times a week, but I had no energy to get out of bed in the morning. And because I had this big career where I was creating these executive training programs for Fortune 500 executives, I thought that it was this demanding career that was causing me to be so stressed out and so burnt out. So I quit that job and I went to go teach yoga full-time, thinking that a more zen-like, a more peaceful-like job would be the answer to all of my problems. But what I found after teaching yoga for just a couple months was that I was just as stressed out as ever. That nothing had really changed, except the only thing that had really changed was that my paycheck was now a lot smaller. And so it was at the same time that I hit rock bottom in my marriage with my husband. From a place of hurt and deep pain, I wanted to look at my husband and I wanted to point my finger at him and blame him for the state of our marriage. But I recognized that there was more going on than just my marriage in my life. I recognized that I was the common denominator in everything that wasn't working for me. And so I chose to take what is perhaps the greatest decision that we can make in order to have personal and professional success. And I chose to be 100% responsible for the outcomes of my life. No more blaming my husband. No more waiting for the circumstances of my life to change. No more waiting for a different political party to take over. No more waiting to move into a different zip code. Right here, right now, I chose to take responsibility for my success or lack thereof at that moment. And so I set out on a journey of emotional intelligence. I worked with therapists and mindset coaches. I worked with business coaches and mindfulness teachers. And I learned how to remove that armor that was holding me back and to have the resilience to stand in my power. From that place, I realized that that big corporate job that I had, I actually really enjoyed, and I was actually really good at it. And with the skills of emotional intelligence, I was able to realize that and go back to that job and make more in profit share, work less hours, and also enjoy myself along the way. So hopefully you can see how this path of emotional intelligence impacted my professional life. Well, it also impacted my personal life. My husband went on his own emotional intelligence at the same time that I did, a different journey, but one that brought us back together to be able to heal our marriage. And what is so cool about this, beyond the fact of being able to heal our marriage, is that shortly after that we gave birth to our first son, Maverick, which you can see in the back there between our heads. Maverick was a blessing, as all children are, as you know. But before we had done the work of emotional intelligence, we had tried to get pregnant several times, and they all had ended in miscarriage. And so it was like the universe was saying, get yourself together before you bring another being into this world that you're responsible for. Hopefully you can see then how emotional intelligence helped to impact my personal life. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. This is just a little bit of data, but if you go to our friend Google and you search the benefits of emotional intelligence, especially as it relates to leadership and resilience, you'll find that EQ, Rich, as your pappy said, is more important than IQ. That EQ is 2 times more important than both IQ and technical skills combined when looking at some data from Harvard. It contributes to more productivity, it contributes to more sales and revenue, it contributes to more resilience, which we're going to talk a lot about today, less accidents, more feelings of belonging within your team, which is important, as we talked about earlier, for retention. So many benefits. So let's go on this journey and look at emotional intelligence and how it can impact you and the teams that you lead. So what is emotional intelligence? I'm speaking to HR professionals, and so you probably have an idea of what this is, but I do want to give an overview so that we're all on the same page here. So simply put, emotional intelligence is your ability to be able to know and understand yourself so that you can better manage yourself, and then be able to know and understand others so that you can better manage others. It's about managing our emotions so that they aren't managing us. And there are 4 pillars of emotional intelligence that I'll briefly give you an overview of, and then we'll dive into them a little bit deeper in just a moment. But the first pillar of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. This is about understanding how you show up in the world and how other people perceive you, accurately perceiving yourself as others do. It's about knowing your values and your strengths, your weaknesses, your patterns, and your triggers. And it's about being in alignment with those values. Once you start to know yourself, you can move into managing yourself, which is the second pillar of emotional intelligence, self-management. And self-management is, I'd like to share the example of my husband and I are into the new Tulsa King show. We love Taylor Sheridan and Yellowstone and all those movies that he does. So we've been watching Tulsa King, and it's really easy to just want to sit and binge watch and stay up late and watch another episode and watch another episode. That feels good in the moment. But when I'm practicing self-management, that would be, okay, let's watch one episode and then let's go to bed and pick it up this weekend, because I know that I have to get up in the morning and I don't want to have to get up and come see all of you on 4 hours of sleep, right? So self-management is delaying that instant gratification, working towards your longer-term goals. It's about maximizing your potential. It's about productivity, and it's about resilience. So we're going to spend a lot of time in self-management today because resilience and self-management are joined at the hip. Once we know and manage ourselves, then we can move into understanding others. The third pillar of emotional intelligence, which is others awareness. Now, if I were to say just one word about what others awareness is, it would be the word empathy. It's also, though, about understanding your organization's philosophies and politics so that you can work within those. And then, after we understand others, we move to the final pillar of emotional intelligence, which is relationship management. And this is where leadership takes place. This is where you are influential. This is where you are building hope and confidence in yourself as a leader and your team, even when you go through something like COVID-19, even when you go through changes, small or big. This is where you're mentoring others, where you're being influential and you're leading from inspiration versus leading from fear, which was a common leadership style back in the days, and maybe we even have some managers that we work with that still lead from fear. But as we've been talking about this discussion of retention, we know that all of us, and really the younger generations especially, want to work for someone that's inspiring them, that's pulling out their greatness, not scaring them into getting their numbers right. So let's move into the first pillar of emotional intelligence. And I'm going to share with you a few ways that we block that resilience that we are looking for ourselves, and also how you can draw this out for your team. So self-awareness is about having emotional vocabulary and insight. It's about understanding and knowing ourselves. What gets in the way of this first pillar of emotional intelligence is suppressed feelings. And this is sometimes where people stop and say, okay, she's going to talk about feelings here in this work setting. And yes, this is emotional intelligence after all. But let me tell you why this is so important. And I want to use this beach ball here as a way for you to understand. So we all live in Florida. We're very lucky that we get to play with the beach ball on a pretty regular basis. And let's say that you are down at the pool and you are minding your own business. It's a sunny day, you're relaxing, you're rejuvenating, and someone throws you a beach ball. Well, okay, there's a beach ball. Wasn't really planning on playing with the beach ball, but thank you, and you could toss the beach ball on. Or someone could throw you a beach ball and you say, well, I wasn't planning on playing with the beach ball today. I don't have time for this. I've got too many other things going on. Why is there a beach ball in front of me? And you can shove the beach ball down underneath the water. Can you shove a beach ball down underneath the water? No, I'm getting some head shakes, no. So you can actually just a little bit shove the beach ball down underneath the water, but you've got to keep your hands on it. And if there's any kind of pressure or the water pushes it up, or you lift your hands, what happens to the beach ball? Whoosh. Yeah, the beach ball flies away and it hits our video recorder, or it hits someone in the face, or it makes a splash, or it breaks a window. That is like what happens with our feelings or our emotions. When they come to us and we shove them down, we ignore them, we numb them by shopping or drinking or overworking or scrolling. When we push them down, they explode out sideways. Maybe 10 days later, when you blow up at one of your coworkers, or 10 weeks later, when you have a fight with one of your family members, or even 10 years later, when you have an illness that presents itself. And the data that we find here in the United States is that it's 95+ of illnesses are stress related. And when we are shoving down our feelings, we are causing stress to our bodies, our psyche, and our nervous system. And so what is the best way to handle these feelings that we have? What is the productive way? Wine. Wine is one of those things that feels good in the moment. And wine is one of those things that I tried as well. It was really easy for me to forget that my marriage wasn't working and forget that I didn't like my job when I had a glass or 3 of wine every night. But it's those feelings of uncomfortableness that we need to lean into, because that's when change happens. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the first invitation that I want to offer you is to observe your feelings and know that they are neutral messengers. So what does this mean? This means that as human beings, we have feelings, and that's part of the human experience. And that our feelings, as one of my Harvard professors calls it, are data. It's information about who we are and what we need to do. Let's say I have the feeling of anger. Well, that means that that's something that I want to take a stand for. Or let's say I have the feeling of joy. Well, that's something that is in line with my zone of genius, that I should be doing more work in that area and request projects in that area. Let's say I have the feeling of resentment. Well, that likely means that I haven't created a boundary, or I created a boundary, but I allowed someone to cross it. Even something like jealousy. I have been jealous of first-time authors over the years because I myself want to be an author and I'm working on becoming an author. But every time I would feel that little bit of jealousy, instead of shoving it down, I thought, I should get on my computer and start typing this book out, right? So it's an indicator of what action we need to take. It's also really helpful because Brené Brown is a researcher of emotions that many of you, I'm sure, have probably heard of. And she found that us humans experience 87 emotions. When she was researching emotions for one of her latest books called Atlas of the Heart, she surveyed, I think it was 2,000 people to find out how many emotions they could name on the regular. And what do you think the average number of emotions that human beings in her study could name on the regular out of 87 were? What do you think? 5, 10, 18? 3. Who said 3? 3. Yes, you got it. That's the answer. The answer is 3. Essentially, the average human, she found, can name being happy, being sad, and being pissed off, mad, whatever you want to call it. Yes. And so this is important because in order to have that self-awareness and in order to help our teams move through adversity, we have to understand how they're feeling. Because if we're just coming forth and saying, or our team is just coming forth and saying, well, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed. Okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you are overwhelmed? Because I can help you as a leader if you're overwhelmed. That's going to look different than I'm so stressed. Are you frustrated about something? Because if you're frustrated about something, that's a different solution for me to help you as a leader. Or are you just tired? Do you need an afternoon off? All of these can be disguised as angry or stressed. And so as we build our emotional vocabulary, we're better able to understand what we need and help our teams move through the solution that supports them and moves them away from burnout. And these are some core feelings. I just show these here to understand that there's, looks like there's one side that's good and there's one side that's bad. Yes, one side doesn't feel as comfortable for us as humans, but they're still important in helping us to move forward. And when we walk around and pretend that everything's always 100% great, we have this toxic positivity, and that allows us to become burnt out. And I'm not saying not to be positive. I'm a huge proponent of being positive and finding the positive pieces, but we have to address what's really coming up for us so we can get to the root of what's causing our stress at work and in our home lives. A final piece that I want to mention about this that is so important as we think about resilience is this concept of comparative suffering. We experienced a lot of this in COVID and also with the hurricane that happened. And this looks like, I'm really sad that I can't see my family and my friends right now during lockdown, but at least no one has died from COVID that I know. Or it could look like, it really sucks that I'm an essential worker and I have to go to work right now while everyone else gets to stay home in quarantine, but at least I have a job. That at least. And so having this gives us perspective, which is good, but what happens when we have comparative suffering is we diminish and we belittle our own feelings and we shove them down and then they end up coming out sideways later. So we want to embrace how we're feeling, take action on it so we can then show up more powerfully for someone who maybe is going through something more than you for right now. Now I want to say why it's so important that we embrace our feelings. It's a challenge for all of us humans because we don't live in a culture that says, show your feelings to everyone. We don't often work in workplaces that say, well, how are you feeling today? Really, I want to know, how are you? Like, how often do you ask that of someone and you don't really even care? You're just going through the conversation, or that people ask that of you. And even when we were growing up and we were learning how to talk about and process our feelings, if something negative happened to us, like let's say I didn't get invited to go to a friend's birthday party, and I came home from school and I was sad, and I said, "Oh, Mom, I didn't get invited to go to Sally's birthday party." And she would say, "Oh, I'm sorry you're sad. Here, have a cookie. This'll make you feel better." Or, "Here, have a toy. This'll make you feel better." And we wonder why so many of us eat our emotions or practice retail therapy. Or maybe if you were a boy, you were told, well, boys have to be tough. You can't cry. You must be a tough boy. Or all of us children were told, well, children are meant to be seen and not heard. Just smile and sit there and look pretty. Even us women in the workforce are often told, well, you can't be angry or everyone's going to think that you're a bitch. And so these feelings are often told to be shoved down, but as we've seen, they come out sideways if we don't observe them. So let's talk about how to observe them. This is a 4-step process for you. And the first one is, right now I feel. Essentially, you name it to tame it. And if you have ever had a toddler, this is something that I embraced a lot, this naming it to tame it, because toddlers are just getting introduced to their feelings. And when they get upset, they think it's going to last forever and it overwhelms their body. And so we have to help them as adults and say, okay, it looks like you're mad that your sister just took your toy right now. Or it looks like you're upset that I'm not going to let you have a third cookie. And so when we name that for our toddlers, they can realize that it's a feeling that's going to move on and they calm down. The same is true for us as adults. There's a lot of overlap between the way that we manage and lead our adult teams as we do our children teams. So number 1, name it to tame it. Right now I feel, fill in the blank. Number 2, how does it feel in my body? This second step is an invitation for mindfulness, for presence. We are often stuck in our heads, and I'm going to be talking a lot about this today with you. One of the quickest ways to get out of our heads and into reality is feel our body. So just, how does this feeling feel in my body right now? That helps us to process it and check in with what's going on. The third step is telling yourself it's okay to feel this way. Because for a lot of us, it wasn't okay, or it's not okay to have our feelings. And then the fourth step is, what message does this feeling have for me? What action can I take based on how I'm feeling right now? And that will lead us through feeling and observing our feeling versus shoving it down for it to come out later sideways in a way that's going to take a lot of time to clean up and repair. So to recap, in order to move into that first pillar of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, we need to observe our feelings. Let's move into the second pillar of emotional intelligence now, self-management, where resilience happens, where maximizing our potential happens. This is a really tricky one because a lot of what we need to do to enhance our self-management and even to be resilient are things that we already know that we should be doing. It's things like getting a good night's sleep, or eating well, or exercising, or learning how to relax, or practicing self-care on the regular, right? These are things that most of us understand that we should be doing. Yet, how often do we not do those things? Or do we deprioritize those things that are setting us up for high performance and resilience? And the reason that this happens is because of what I call permeating patterns. This is something that's happening in our mind, that even though we know we should be doing these things that are good for us, we don't do them. And this goes all the way back to the very earliest days of our human evolution. It's been millions of years since humans were here. And while technology and AI, I know we're using things like ChatGPT and all this stuff with our HR operations, while technology has changed drastically over hundreds of years, our brain, our human brain, has changed very little. And so think about the earliest days of our human ancestors. There were a lot of dangers back then. There were saber-toothed tigers that could come around the corner, or an opposing tribe that was hungry that wanted to come steal our food, or a storm that was rolling in and we had to go and find a place under a rock or a cave to take shelter. And so what our brain did in those earliest days is it started to compartmentalize information. It started to group it together. It started to patternize data so that we could stay on the alert for any danger that might be coming our way. And for those of us humans that stayed on the alert to notice any danger so that we could take action, we stayed alive, and thus the evolution of our brain creating these patterns, these permeating patterns happened. This is why you can drive here to this event without even thinking about driving. This is why you can brush your teeth and walk down the road or walk down to in your bathroom at the same time. Right? We are living in patterns so our brain can find danger, even though there's a lot less danger that we experience today as human beings. So neuroscientists have looked at this a lot further, and they have found that humans are operating in their unconscious, or what some call subconscious, 90 to 95% of the time. Let me say that again. We as humans are operating in our unconscious or subconscious, our patterned mind, 90 to 95% of the time. We're doing those things that are a pattern, that are a habit for us. So in order for us to have resilience, in order for us to be impactful leaders, we need to move into consciousness, conscious decisions, conscious choice. We need to up that 5 to 10% of the time. Let's talk about how to do that. I'm going to share with you the 3 permeating patterns that are most common that I see and how we can break through them. The first one is what I call head hurricanes. And I want to tell you a story about this to help you understand what a head hurricane is. So I have a friend named Vicki, and her kids are very similar in age to my 2 young boys. And I wanted to invite her over to our house for a happy hour play date. So I sent her a text message and said, hey, Vicki, let's come over this Friday for a happy hour play date. Now, Vicki is one of those people that's really good on her phone and text message response, very different from how I am, and she usually responds pretty quickly. But an hour went by and she never responded to my text invitation. Didn't think too much about it, went about my day, and then another hour went on. Still no response from Vicki. And another hour, no response from Vicki. Oh my gosh, I forgot to ask about how her mother-in-law was doing last time I saw her. Oh my gosh, I'm such a bad friend. How could I have forgot to ask about that? I wonder what else I forgot about. Oh my gosh, another hour goes by. Oh my gosh, why am I having such problems maintaining these friendships? Why is this such a challenge for me? I'm such a bad friend. Hour by hour, I'm beating myself up because Vicki hasn't responded to my text message. It's a hurricane in my head that has completely taken over. Well, how do you think I feel when Vicki texted me the next morning and said, hey, I'd love to come over for a happy hour play date. I had family in town and I couldn't respond right away. All of that stress and energy diverted from my work was created by this story, this head hurricane that I was experiencing. We have another example of this at work. Let's say you just brought in a brand new manager that you're really excited about. And you hear from their supervisor that this manager has been showing up late for work for the first couple weeks that they were on the job. And you think, why is this person showing up late for work? I really thought they cared. They must be lazy. How could I not notice that they were lazy during the interview process? Gosh, I thought I was way better at filtering through these resumes. What am I even doing in this recruiting job anyways? Why am I in this role? And we start to build this whole story about this person that's showing up late. And if we take that story to the person and we say, hey, why are you so lazy? Why are you showing up for late for work? I really thought you cared when I hired you. Is that person going to want to be working for us? No. Even if they had a good reason, are they going to want to work for us? No. If they have something stressful, some adversity that they're already stressed out about, is that going to add to it and make it worse for them? Yes. Yeah, so the way that we get past these hurricanes in our heads is to, well, one of the things we can do is to meditate. I'll let you again visit our friend Mr. Google to find out about all the benefits of meditation, but meditation helps us to increase our focus, increase our decision-making capabilities, and to really notice when we're in that hurricane in our head and come back to the present moment. So I have an ebook called Simply Start Meditating that I'll share with you how you can download for free after my presentation if this is something that you want to explore. The other solution that I have for you is the invitation to focus on the neutral facts. So first, we recognize that we're in head hurricane, and then we look for the neutral facts. So in my story with my friend Vicky, the neutral facts were that I invited her to come over for a play date, and she hadn't responded. Everything else was made up in my head. When we look at the new manager that was showing up late, the neutral facts are that he or she was showing up late. Everything else was made up in my head. But when I assess the neutral facts and I go and I start poking around for what's going on with the neutral facts, that's when I can be an impactful leader. Hey, I see that you've been showing up late for work the last few weeks. We both want you to be really successful in this job. Help me understand what's going on here. Well, what if that person told you that they've been interviewing this team that they were supposed to hire down at Starbucks across the street, right? They're doing their job, or maybe they had someone at home who had to be in the hospital for a week that they've had to help out with the morning, right? Until we address the neutral facts, can we then find the root of the problem and help our team members through that? Number 2, the second permeating pattern that overtakes a lot of us is the murky mindset. So we can either have a mindset that is clean and bright and shiny, or we can have a mindset that is murky and muddled and dirtied. And the things that really impact this mindset that we have is what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, and who we hang out with. You've probably heard other life coaches and personal development people tell you that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I'm going to share some data with you on that in just a moment. But I want to share with you a story on how we build these murky mindsets and how they don't often serve us. So before I had children, I had 2 golden retrievers. You saw them on the earlier picture that I shared with you. And I also used to love to watch the show CSI Miami. Anyone else here a CSI Miami fan? Okay, good. And I don't even really know what it was about the show, but I just loved binge watching CSI Miami. One night I was out walking my dogs around the circle that I lived on, and a car drove by us. I didn't think much about it, but as we kept walking, that car drove by us a second time. And so I paid a little bit more attention to the car, and I saw that there were 4 men in the car, and they seemed to be looking me up and down and also eyeing my dogs. So that started to freak me out a little bit. So I picked up my pace and continued on the circle that I was walking with my dogs. They drove by again, a 3rd time. And at that point, I was freaked out. So I ran into my house, I closed the door, I locked the door, I closed the windows, and I started to call my husband who was working on the phone and tell him what was going on. And just as I was picking him up on the phone, I was peeking through the little blinds in my front window, and I saw them drive by a 4th time. I was about to hang up and call the cops right then and there because I thought they were going to come into the house and who knows, do what with me. But I had one of those 5 to 10% conscious moments for a brief second, and I stepped out of my fear and I looked at the neutral facts and I took a deep breath. I looked at that car, and while I thought there had been 4 grown men in that car, there were 4 boys, teenagers, probably barely even old enough to drive, just gotten their license, and they weren't scoping me out. In fact, they were laughing with one another and pointing around. They were probably trying to figure out which of their friends' house to toilet paper that night. But because CSI Miami was the regular in my mind, I went right to the fact that they were going to rape and murder me and put me in their trunk and drive off. So I recognized that association was impacting the way that I viewed the world. As I mentioned, let me share some data with you. A lot of us watch the news to be informed. The news is something that also impacts the way that we view the world. Because, not that this is wrong, but the news gets its advertising dollars from your attention. And we know that the 2 emotions that spike attention in human beings are fear and anger. And so the news likes to promote those stories, sensational news media, to promote those stories that are all about drumming up fear and anger in us. There's a lot of really good stuff happening, but that doesn't meet the fear and anger attention-getting need, and so that doesn't make the news. Yet we're funneling this stuff into our brains all day long. If you look at the history of our world, and some of this data is from the Bureau of Justice, we are living in the safest of times. We are living in the best of times for human beings. But if you watch the news, even for 5 minutes, it will not seem like that. So my caution for you is to eliminate entirely or cut way back on the amount of news that creates that murky mindset in your mind. Let's also think about the people that you spend time with. Data from a few different sources that I have listed here, from Brown, Harvard, and a UC San Diego study, and also from the National Institutes of Health, say that our peer group, the people that we spend the most time with, can influence our obesity drastically. If we have a friend that becomes obese, either 57 to 75%, 71% more likely for us to become obese. And the same with divorce. If we have a friend that gets divorced, we are 75% more likely to get divorced. All right, these are just a couple little studies, but when we are around people, they become our new level of what we find acceptable, or our new level of success. And so it's so great that all of you are here at Flourish, because you are surrounding yourself by amazing people that have the same goals as you. We want to make sure that we are doing that on the regular, so that when we're hit with adversity, we have a positive mindset to bounce back on, not one that's already clouded with all of these negativities. So how do we do this? My invitation for you, and I want you to actually do this right now, so grab a piece of paper, or you can use your mobile device if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to take an association audit. I want you to think about, what are the things that you have listened to, watched, read, consumed, and who have you hung out with over the last 30 days? And if you had to rate that on a scale of 1 to 10 for that whole group, would you give it a 10, meaning super positive, empowers you, lifts you up to be your best self? Or a 1, pretty much I just want to lay in bed and put a cover over my head and never come out? Write down that number. How would you audit the associations that you choose for yourself? And this is important because awareness is the first step towards change. So we can check in, we can see what the associations that we are exposing ourselves to are doing to us, and then and only then can we start to make changes that move us forward. All right, the final of the permeating pattern that I want to speak to you about are these bogus beliefs. Bogus beliefs are limiting beliefs, false thoughts, things like imposter syndrome that all of us experience. Whether you recognize it, whether you admit it, we all have some sort of bogus belief that runs through us and shows up from time to time. Something like, I am not good enough, or I am not smart enough, or I lack something, or I am not pretty enough, or I am not funny enough, or I am not tall enough, or I didn't grow up in the right neighborhood, or I didn't go to the right school. Some form of I am not enough. And when that bogus belief rules us, we self-sabotage our career and our relationships. We neglect our self-care, even though we know that it's important. And we have a hard time standing in our power and bouncing back from adversity and having that resilience. So the ongoing false belief, the bogus belief that I had, was that I am not wanted. And that showed up in my life in many different ways. In high school, it showed up in the fact that I did a lot of drugs and partied, because as soon as I did drugs with someone, hey, I was wanted. We connected, I belonged. There was this false connection there. And so drugs were my answer in high school. Then when I moved into my career, I worked really hard. And even when my managers came to me and said, hey, you've got a lot on your plate, can we help you? What can we do to support you? I never accepted the help, and I just kept working longer hours and doing more than any of my colleagues, because I thought, hey, if I just do all this work, I can prove that I am wanted. My job will be stable. My job will be secure. So I overworked more than any of my other colleagues in the same role as me. This I am not wanted bogus belief even showed up in my marriage with my husband. Because I thought that he might one day realized that he didn't want me, I only put one foot in the door of my marriage. I kept the other foot out because I subconsciously was thinking, well, as long as I don't put my whole self into our marriage, well, then it won't hurt as bad when he realizes that he doesn't want me. But what that really did is that put a wall between us. And of course, it's not a great thing to have one foot in the door of your marriage, right? So we have these bogus beliefs, and our step to get out of them and so that they no longer control us is for us to first notice them when they show up. And then it's for us to understand the truth, to amplify our truth. And the truth is that you are whole and I am whole. The truth is you have strength and I have strength. The truth is you are wanted and I am wanted. Right? We all have successes. We all have great things to bring forth that we sometimes need to be reminded about. And so what I want you to do right now is to be reminded of the greatness that is you, because I also want you to do this with your team. One of the easiest ways that you can help your team move through adversity, move through change, and practice resilience is to help them see where they've been resilient in the past, where they've already had success in the past, and how they can apply those strengths to what they're facing in the current moment. And so your turn first. I want you to keep that piece of paper that you have, and I want you to start right now making a list. Make a list of how have I been resilient and successful in the past. And I want you to really do this. I'm going to give you a minute, so please write this down. How have you been resilient and successful in the past? How have you been resilient and successful in the past? The scary thing about what we're all doing together is that you are going to forget 87% of what I just shared with you today and every speaker shared with you today within 30 days. Learning retention for us adults is very challenging, but when we do things like these little exercises, when we write things down, it helps us to remember. So take about 30 more seconds. What have you been resilient and successful for in the past? What else have you done that's been resilient or successful? Keep on going, make your list. So when I started my business, my mindset coach invited me to do a similar exercise to this. And every time that I was lacking confidence, every time that I thought, oh my gosh, who am I to come on stage and talk to people? She would have me look at this list to move me past that imposter syndrome and to realize that I do have value to add. And you can do the same. You can also do the same for your teams. So to recap, in order for us to have self-management, to be resilient and productive, we have to move past those permeating patterns and move into our conscious mind more than just 5 to 10% of the time. And you can use those tools that I shared with you to bring yourself there. Let's now move into the third pillar of emotional intelligence, which is others awareness. Now you know yourself. Now you can better manage yourself. It's time to get out there and better understand and manage your team. It's time to help your team move through change and tackle adversity to come out even more resilient. Empathy. One of the things that gets in the way of our empathy is fixative speaking. Now, this is really hard, I found, for all of us human beings, especially all of you, right? You're here because you're successful. You're here because you've had success in your business, answering the questions and having all the answers. But as we become leaders and as we're faced with a team that might be experiencing burnout or stress or going through change, we can't have all the answers. If we have all the answers, that means we're always going to have someone knocking on our door and asking us for those answers. We're going to have a really long workday, and our team is never going to be empowered. And when we're quick to jump in and fix, we don't allow our team, our family, whoever we're talking to share what's really going on. We don't allow people space to be seen, to be heard and to be understood. And gosh, we're talking about retention today, and we're talking about creating these cultures of belonging. This is what our people, those that work for you, want to be seen, heard, and understood. And listening is one of the easiest ways that we can do that and help those, especially those who are going through burnout, to transition. Because one of the main pieces of burnout is we want to just know that we're not alone. We want to have a way of sharing what's going on and causing us stress. And so as we can be the listener, that vessel for listening, we can offer a lot of resilience for our team. Let's play with this a little bit. What I want you to do is I want you to stand up and I want you to find a partner in just a moment. And I want you to find a partner that you didn't come here with that you don't know, right? We talked about the power of association, so I want you to find a new association who is positive and uplifting that you don't already know. And after you partner up, we're going to do a listening exercise. One person is going to answer a question, and the other person is going to listen. When you're the listener, you're just going to listen. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to say, oh gosh, that happened to me too. You're not allowed to think about what your response is, because that's usually what I'm doing. When I'm supposed to be listening, I often am trying to figure out what I'm going to say, but that's not really listening. When you are the listener, your job is going to be just to listen. No words, listening to let this person feel seen, heard, and understood. Is that clear? Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is to stand up and find a partner, and then the person who's wearing the most purple, and I've seen a lot of purple here today, which is awesome. Purple's my color, and yeah, we got the purple in the back. Purple, the color purple stands for creativity and wisdom and transformation, and so wow, let's get behind that. So whoever is wearing the most purple, you are going to listen first. Whoever is wearing the least purple, you are going to answer the question, what head hurricane have I been struggling with recently and why? Okay? I'm going to time you too, so you're going to speak and listen until I say time's up. Questions about that? Okay, so everyone stand up. Find a partner, someone that you haven't worked with yet, that you don't know. If you need a partner, why don't you raise your hand? If you need a partner, please raise your hand. Got someone up here. Okay, then decide who has the most purple on. Okay. Person with the most purple, you listen. You don't say anything, you just listen. Person with the least purple, answer the question, what head hurricane have I been struggling with and why? I'm going to time you, go. Okay, time's up. Please stay where you're at, but just give me your attention for a quick moment. Okay, the second part of this exercise is now the person wearing the most purple who just listened. You are going to validate your partner. You're going to tell them what you heard. You're going to say, it sounded like this. You want to not make assumptions. You want to say, this is what it sounded like. Maybe you picked up on something that was said underneath what was actually said, right? That's our job as being a good listener. So your job for 1 minute, and I will time you, is to validate the person. Make sure they feel seen, heard, and understood, and you can simply repeat back what you took from what they shared with you, okay? All right, go. Okay, time is up. All right, I'm going to have you go back to your seats at this point, please. You've been great. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so I see some hugs. This is all good. I wanna check in with all of you before we move on. And I'd love to hear from either party, either the listener or the speaker. And how was that experience for you? Did you take anything from it? Was it challenging? Was it easy? Who would like to be a brave person and share? All right, we got one right here. There you go. Awesome. I appreciate you all sharing and doing this. We are rounding out the time for me here with all of you. So I want to offer one final invitation for you. Because it's so easy for us to, forget all of these great nuggets of information that we've experienced from my session and from the session of the earlier speakers and even the ones that are yet to come. I want you to think about, over this last hour, what has been the most impactful takeaway for you? What can you do, based on what you've heard or experienced, to be a more resilient leader? And I want you just to think of one thing, the most important thing. And then I want you to think of just one tiny baby step that you can do to put that into play within the next 24 hours. Because research shows that when we take a step on a goal or an intention within 24 hours of making it, we are much more likely to achieve that goal. So what's one tiny little baby step thing that you can do within the next 24 hours to become a more resilient leader and put what we talked about today into action? Write that down, and I would love to hear about that if you'd like to share with me as well. My final invitation for you is I have a QR code and a bit.ly that has access to these slides, that Simply Start Meditating ebook that I mentioned, and many other EQ and resilience resources. So if you'd like to download them, you can go to the QR code if we can get it up, or you can come see me in the back of the table and I'll get you signed up for those slides and for those resources that can support you. But thank you for your time, and I look forward to chatting with you during the rest of this conference. Oh, there we go. Close. Thank you so much.
Thank you.